Good morning, guys. How are you? It's Kevin back out here this morning to buck and split the rest of this ash tree. And I wanted to take the time to address a few comments that I got on the last video. Chief among those are whether or not these hollow-handled fiberglass splitters give off more shock than your typical wooden-handled splitter. I'm going to address that right now, so stay tuned. So before I tell you guys what I think, let me ask you a question, seriously. Do you know these fiberglass handles to communicate more shock into your arms, or do you merely believe it to be the case?
By all that is holy, wooden handles are better than plastic.
Now hold on a second. I'm not suggesting that you're wrong. I am actually asking. I think this is subjective and hard to measure. But my real concern here is that WranglerStar started this rumor 5 years ago whenever he swung this axe twice and said that it was worse than a wooden handle. I'm not quite so sure. Hear me out on this. All right, so here's the theory as I've heard it. These hollow fiberglass handles are meant to translate the shock not down the outside of the handle, but through the inside and out, not through your arms.
What in the tarnation?
I don't know if that's true or not. In fact, it sounds like a lot of BS, but that's not my argument. Here's my argument. So as I see it, there's no way that your modern stock wooden handle on a splitter, which looks a lot more like this beastly thing than it does like this whippy little thing from Killinger. Now, there's a good argument that you don't want something like this on a splitting axe, but if you're talking about this compared to this, I just don't see how you could argue that that stiff board of a handle that almost every splitting axe comes on. Some of them are crazy thick. You see those Oxenkoff splitting handles? They're crazy thick. There's no way that that stiff board of a thing translates any more shock into your arms than this thing does. There's just no way. There we go. And that brings me to the last part of my argument. The only time you're really getting a lot of shock when you're splitting is when you're trying to bust open these big rounds. Other than that, the shock that you get from splitting is really minimal compared to the shock you get when you're chopping. That's why you see felling axes so thin in olden days, because guys were trying to break the handle before they broke their arms. Since we're on the topic, let me address another thing I've been thinking about for a while. So I don't think that guys preferred thin whippy handles in the olden days merely to negate the amount of shock that they got in their arms. I also think it's just a matter of comfort. Compare a thin little whippy handle to a baseball bat. If it were true that guys who had big hands needed a thicker handle, there's no way that guys like Barry Bonds and Ken Griffey Jr. would have been wrapping their hands around a tiny little baseball bat to hit home runs. It's also just a matter of comfort. I don't see how that's not obvious, but it isn't just a matter of shock, to repeat myself. It's a matter of comfort. That said, I don't think you want your splitting handles as thin as your chopping handles, because they are more likely to break that way. They just are. And they're gonna take a lot of abuse up here by the eye from overstrikes and just from throwing the axe around. On the other hand, I don't think you want your splitting axe handles as thick and gnarly and beastly as they come on production axes these days. This is more or less what I like on a wooden splitting handle. And I'll move you guys in so you can see this, but more rounded than flat, which isn't the way I like my chopping handles, and a little bit more thick up by here so that it can take some abuse. So the cool thing is, because we have the doobly-doo below, we can actually discuss these things openly, honestly, and calmly. And while I can't devise a scientific method to actually determine whether fiberglass handles are superior to wooden splitting handles, I can honestly analyze my experience and my opinions and attempt to discern whether or not I know this to be true as a matter of experience, or if I'm interpreting my experience via wise words that I've heard from somebody else. I'm asking you to do the same thing, and then let me know what you guys think down in the doobly-doo below. The last thing I wanted to say about splitters is I like handles that are 28 inches or like 31 inches. It is nice to have that little extra length.
Hey, Big Karen, is it true that an extra inch goes a long way?
When you really need to give it some and bust a round up. This one's fucked. What happened to that one? God. You guys see that? That one hit something. There's just one last thing I want to say about this. Believe me or not, take it with whatever grain of salt you want. But when I go out and split for the day, with that Fiskars mostly, I don't re-aggravate my tennis elbow. Or if I do, it's minimal. But if I go out and chop for the day, no matter what handle I take, my arms hurt for the next week. If you're new here, I got a bad case of tennis elbow, not because of this stuff, though I'm sure it doesn't help, but because of work. I'll pop a video in so you know what I do. But thanks to all the new subs. Good to see you guys here. Please hit that thumbs up button. Click subscribe. Comment in the doobly-doo below. And all that jazz. See you on the next one.